we know this control has a gap. You might not be aware of that.
Hello and welcome to episode 13, season 1 of your Cyber Threat Intelligence podcast. Whether you're a seasoned CTI expert, a cybersecurity professional, or simply curious about the digital battlefield, our expert guests and host will break down complex topics into actionable insights. On this episode of season 1, our host Pedro Kertzman will chat with Bianca Miclea, who is a cybersecurity leader with over 10 years of experience driving strategic initiatives across large financial institutions. She specializes in delivering complex security programs that bring real value to decision makers. She is the partnerships lead for the WEC's UK and Ireland, and is passionate about empowering women in STEM and advocating for diversity and inclusion in the industry. Over to you, Pedro.
Bianca, thank you so much for joining the show. It's really great to have you here. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I usually start asking the guests about their journey into CTI. Would you mind walking us through that, please?
Yeah, so I guess it's a bit of a non-traditional journey compared to people who have studied computer science, cybersecurity, any way, shape, or form. So I've studied politics at university. It's always been one of those industries that I thought, this is really cool, but I could never do that. But then between my undergrad and my master's degree, I actually took a gap year, and I was working at a consultancy, kind of doing anything and everything that was not related to cybersecurity in any way, shape, or form. But they actually had a client-facing cybersecurity team. I just got curious. And on my last 2 weeks with the company, I actually asked, hey guys, can I just shadow you for a little bit? Can I see what you guys do? What's this cyber thing about, Because it sounds very cool and I'm very interested. So I spent 2 weeks with them and I loved it. I absolutely fell in love with it. They were doing threat intelligence for clients, so kind of reporting what's out there, just had the platform where they would update on a daily basis, create historical, all the cool stuff, all the good things. So I got really interested into it. I still went on and did politics though. So, because that was what my master's was about. That's what I was planning to do. Again, it was one of those, this is really cool, but I could never do this. But whilst I was doing my master's, actually the manager from that team emailed me and said, hey, we've got an opening for an internship if you want to join our team. I got really excited and obviously I said yes. So for a period of time, I was doing the internship as well as my master's, finishing that off. And that was a 3 months internship with the opportunity to get a full-time job at the end, which I ended up getting. So I ended up being a researcher, from a researcher to an analyst. So kind of moving up the ladder from there. I've spent about 3 years, I think, roughly in CTI. And then I just got curious about what other areas of cyber are there? What do the other teams do? What are the ins and outs of VM, of supplier risk, all of these other interesting areas that make up the cyber family. And I went and did consulting. I went to a couple of big fours, moved around a little bit, project-based. So it basically touched on everything under the sun, because it was, this client is this for 6, 9 months, 2 weeks, whatever it was. And then you move on to another project and another project. So it was really, really good overview of how things work and what else is there. And at the time, it was GDPR was a hot topic. So it was all getting into that GDPR area and suppliers and all of that interesting data. But after about 2.5 years, I think, again, roughly 3 years, I just really miss CTI. I thought, right, okay, I've done all of the other bits that I could think of doing. I know I love CTI, so I'm going to go back into it. So I did. Ended up, again, kind of touching on CTI throughout my consulting life anyway. So I was helping set up a team alongside other people initially, whilst I was also being a consultant doing other bits. But then when I decided to move back into CTI, I decided to make a change and actually go from client-facing to internal. And I've moved internally to a large financial sector organization in the UK, but also globally. And that was basically setting up their CTI structure from scratch. So CTI team from scratch. They had a process for ingesting IOCs and kind of the basics of what would keep the lights on. But they had kind of no official CTI team or structure. So that was me coming into that and helping set that up and build that up. Done that for about 3 years as well, build a strategy, build up the team processes, all of the good stuff. And where I'm currently sitting is security engineering. So moved a little bit away from CTI. However, because I loved it so much, and as my career has shown, can't stay away from it for too long. So I actually ended up now looking after both the security engineering team and the CTI team. So still doing a little bit of CTI at the moment.
Yeah, that's awesome. Would you say that your background on politics, your masters and all that are helping you or helped you in the past throughout this CTI journey?
It did, yeah. So I guess this is a broader question, and this comes down to what is CTI. So I feel like CTI means different things to different people depending on where you stand. In terms of politics and economics and all of the stuff I did at masters and university, yes, absolutely, it was helpful from the strategic point of view of CTI, understanding the who, the why, the relationships, the tensions, knowing when to spot that actually I think this will escalate. So Russia-Ukraine was a good example. The war started in February. However, in around December time, I believe, end of November, December time, I raised it to the team at the time and I said, I think this will become a problem. I think we need to look into what suppliers we have in these areas, a plan for if this was to escalate. And to be honest, it wasn't taken too seriously at first. It was a bit of I think this will be a waste of resources. I don't think this will escalate. And everyone at the time, in terms of actual political analysts, well, not everyone, but most people were on the idea that actually this won't escalate to a full-blown war. Fast forward to February, full-blown war started, but we were ready. We, by that time, had a full-on assessment on all our critical supplies in Ukraine and around the region. How are we connected? Where are we connected? What data transfers are happening? Okay. What are we going to do? What buttons are we going to press in case there is escalating to a war? So yes, to answer your question, it did help in terms of the strategic point of view, but it comes down to what you understand from CTI. So I had a lot of learning to do in terms of the tactical and operational side of things, in terms of understanding threat actors, IOCs, the difference between a tip and how different people understand the tip. Because if you say tip to someone, you might not necessarily be talking about the right thing. Some people might think threat feeds and the capability to do some custom alerting, whilst other people might be thinking an actual tip where IOCs are ingested and you can do malware analysis, investigations, and the more tactical side of things. So it really, I feel like CTI it is getting better, but it still needs a definition or that discussion of what do you understand by CTI when you mean CTI, when you mean strategic, when you mean a tip, what are you actually talking about here?
Perfect. And talking about the experience you mentioned about the financial institution building the team from scratch, I think it's not a super common experience around the market. Like I see more the organic growth and then building a CTI program, slowly building a CTI program instead of having, like, I would imagine, a fairly big budget and then decided what to do with that. Any thoughts around what was the focus? Was that like people, tools? How like you build from scratch with a reasonable budget a CTI team from zero?
I think in terms of the approach, I guess the initial discussions we had and the decisions we had to make was whether this would be what kind of CTI function they wanted to have and what they wanted that CTI function to deliver. And that was one of the key areas that I had to focus on. The questions were around where there is a CTI team in terms of, hey, we report every week on what's going on externally. This might be talking about healthcare and retail and, there might be a financial sector attack there or something relevant. But it's not really linked directly into the SOC, to IOCs, to the processes, into suppliers. So there was an initial conversation around there that, yes, I can do that. That bit is not hard to do. There's plenty of information out there at the moment on all of these kind of attacks. You just spend a bit of time and you'll get all the data. The conversation I was having and where I was trying to get the team to is actually building that inbuilt SOC team that actually provides actionable intelligence, relevant intelligence, things that you can do something with and that you can really get the so what behind this. So, bringing in supplier, bringing in the tools that we're using, understanding vulnerabilities, working with the detect and respond team to understand what are we seeing, what are the trends. So that was one of the initial points and discussions that we were having. So once that was defined and understood and the direction was set, it was then easier to say, right, okay, this is what we want to do. So we need to build XYZ. We need to understand IOC processes. We need to start from the bottom, which at the time and where we were at, it meant tactical, and then slowly build your way into operational, the who, the how, the why, and then the strategic. So the strategic piece around, what's happening geopolitically, what are we looking at, wars and politics and economics, and PESTO was one of the frameworks I used, and I found very helpful in that scenario. But that came last. That came after everything else was set up, after we understood our crown jewels, our suppliers, our tools, after internal processes were set up that allowed me to reach out to people I needed and get information quickly. So yeah, that was kind of the journey as I went through it.
Perfect. I'm not sure if it's a controversial topic. Would you say the CTI team should be part of the SOC, not part of the SOC? Any thoughts around that?
Controversial topic indeed. So I think, again, it depends on what you want to achieve. So obviously, if you're a CTI team that provides that's client facing and provides reports and stuff like that to a client, that's a different story. But if you are an internal team and you're looking to build up a CTI function, my personal experience that it works best when it's aligned to the SOC, when it's integrated in the SOC, when that team has the capability to talk to detect and response, engineering, VM, supplier risk, when that person, it's almost the way I see CTI is, it's like a bridge between the SOC and the organization. And that bridge would mean, hey, detect and response team might not have the time to speak to supplier risk or ISOs or, have a look at whatever decision was made on the board level or business level on a regular basis. But the CTM team do and should. So that should be that integration piece of, this is what the business needs. This is what we're seeing on a tactical level on the ground. This is what I think we should do. And that, from my experience, worked best. That's what actually drives value from a CTI team, because you're not just providing noise. And again, this might be controversial, but you're not just providing news feeds or alerts that actually nobody does anything with. And that comes back into another, I suppose, quite a difficult thing, is around how do you actually measure then the effectiveness of a CTI team and reporting and KPIs, and having it as part of a SOC helps with that, because you can then start having a look at false positive rates. You can have a look at mean time to detect. You can have a look at what or how many changes were done based on a CTI report or recommendation in the last 6 years or 6 months, or 1 year. So you can kind of start to quantify CTI in a way that is a little bit harder to do if that integration with the SOC was not there.
That's a great point. And with that experience as well from building the CTI team from zero, any top 3, 5 KPIs almost every CTI team should have on their KPIs list? So
I think, I think I mentioned some of the critical ones there. It really depends on how mature the team and the function is. If you are just starting off, and if you are 100 days into building up the CTI function, those KPIs are not going to be existent. You will need to build up historical data. You will need to work on actually getting those processes in place to be able to monitor and measure, for example, false positive rates. But yes, if we are talking in a generalized average CTI maturity, let's say, like 3-5 years down the line, then I think some of the critical ones that you should have is, as I said, false positive rates in terms of IOCs. What is actually the team, and not just IOCs, but are you doing threat hunts? Are those threat hunts reaching the right points? Are you looking at the right tools? What are the false positive rates on that? Other bits is mean time to detect. How quickly is the team actually detecting what's going on externally or internally? Are most of the news feeds coming to you from exec? Is the board asking you, hey, I've seen this in the news, what's it about? And then you're reactive? Or are you actually proactive to things? And that can be difficult to do because everybody reads the news. And a CTI team is more than just reading the news, especially if it's integrated with the SOC. So it can be difficult to achieve, but it should be one of those, how long does it take us to pick up things? How long does it take us to escalate it? And the other thing is around making it actionable. Again, a difficult KPI to have, but I think every CTI team should have it. Otherwise, you lose focus. You lose the so what and the why. And that making it actionable can take different forms. So you can look at, as I said, how many controls have been improved in the last 6 months based on recommendations that we have made. Or, I don't know, how many sessions have we delivered, training sessions or awareness sessions to the business, to the board, to whoever your audience is. How many engagement have we had with suppliers team or with VM team or other external teams, and what impact has that had? So I think, again, it really depends on where you are, but I think that actionable intelligence, where is what you're doing, where is it going, and what are people doing in it? It's something that every CTI team should keep in mind and have a look at and review on a regular basis.
Awesome. No, I love that. And one probably common topic I hear from many other guests is that CTI teams, they need to do a better job on selling their value upstream.
Exactly, yeah.
So
which is difficult.
It is. So that's why I wanted to hear your take on the best KPIs or how to sell value to the organization and things like just to share with the community. Because again, it's I would say rare experience to have, building from the ground up a CTI team on a larger organization, already mature cybersecurity organization, I'm sure, and then building that within that organization. So that's great. Thank you. And you built it. It's up and running. What's next? Any lessons learned on the maturing part of the process, maturing that CTI program?
Yeah, definitely. So again, the reviewing those KPIs are a key lesson learned there is, right, now the team is functional and we're doing reports and we're doing this. Let's review KPIs and make sure the team understands the value, understands where we are. I guess a CTI team is never really mature because the threat landscape changes all the time. And you need to, as a CTI team, you need to stay, and as an organization in general, but CTI even more so, I guess the expectation is there because you are CTI, that you are on top of everything. You're never really going to be mature because things will always change. New tools are being implemented. AI is coming down. What does that mean? How can you use it? Or can you use it? Are you allowed to use it? Should we use it? It's all of these questions around not just what's changing in the threat landscape, but what's changing in the way CTI works in terms of processes, in terms of people, in terms of skills. As more people understand CTI, and as the CTI, I guess, journey went from a little bit of a buzzword when it first started and a regulatory requirement and, one of those, hey, this is the cool new kid in town, to now people actually having this more and understanding what it is and more people doing it and more skills being built that way, then you have to consider how are skills requirement changing based on this as well. More people require malware analysis, for example, or threat hunting. Not everyone has the capability to have a CTI team and a threat hunting team. Now, whether that should be separate, it's a whole different discussion. But, those skills set are required in a majority of cases, or at least are expected to some extent that the CTI analyst would be able to. So yeah, I think overall in terms of what does it come after? Maturing, keep reviewing those KPIs and making sure you're hitting the right spots and you're measuring the right things and that the company can still see the value from you on a constant basis. And also just integration with the rest of the company. So if you are integrated with the SOC, that's the first step. That's not the end of the journey. Once you're integrated with the SOC, once the team is in place and the processes are in place and you've got some kind of tip, now you need to start talking to the business. Now you need to start talking to all of the, identifying stakeholders outside of your initial SOC team or your initial sphere of influence, let's put it that way. Who else can we talk to? What do they need from us? Because then intelligence requirements might change or adapt, or you might find things that actually this isn't a crown jewel as we thought we are. I think this was a priority for someone, but not for someone else. So it is it's almost like a constant review of that maturity. You're never really mature, I think.
Yeah, environments change, right? So the company, business model might change as well.
Exactly.
That review is super important for sure. Between all those changes, I think it's fair to say we have one constant within CTI, which is the Mitre ATT&CK frameworks.
Yes.
And within that journey, any like Mitre map exercise or things related to the Mitre knowledge that you thought was important to use at that time?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, it's a really nice transition from CTI to security engineering. And I think one of the lessons learned, I guess, from after maturing is work closely with your security engineering teams, because those Mitre maps and this work that CTI is doing in identifying control gaps and providing recommendations, it is very useful if you then actually have a team to apply it to. So one of the lessons learned I had from doing loads of Mitre maps in my career, throughout my career, and gap analysis and heat maps, and going from, hey, let's do it in a spreadsheet in Excel to actually how can we automate it, and all of that journey. One of the biggest learning points, I guess, for me was actually, how do we take this forward in a regular way, in a way that engages and reaches the right people, and that gives the CTI team the right information? Because one of the things I found in my assessments in my CTI life is that, right, okay, I've done a CTI, a Mitre map. I understand what threat actors are using. I now know what controls we have against it. However, CTI team often do not have the assurance, let's put it that way, of how effective those controls are. And this is where doing work with other teams works really well. So what we've started doing recently is implementing a monthly Mitre map exercise that involves various teams within the SOC, including security engineering, detect and respond, threat hunting.
That's nice.
Just various teams. The CTI person will go off and do the Mitre mapping and find out what the key attack types are and techniques and where the gaps are as per where we think we are. And then we all get in a meeting together in a workshop, face-to-face or virtual, whatever it is, and we sit down and talk through those controls, one by one, through each of those identified gaps or identified, coverage even. Because even if they say, oh, we've got a phishing button, so we're protected against phishing, this might not be the case. So it's just bringing all those people together to say, actually, that has a gap. We know this control has a gap. You might not be aware of that because you haven't seen what we do, but we are aware of it. So it's just bringing all these people together, and doing that exercise has been extremely helpful and has found, mini gaps and things that we could then go on and making it actionable. It comes back to that making it actionable piece, because then you actually know what is coming out of these meetings is going to be, you are responsible for patching that gap, or we are responsible for accepting this risk, or whatever the action is. There is an action coming down from those meetings.
Awesome. And maybe stitching a few of those points together. So you mentioned the phishing for the users, and also changing sometimes the stakeholders and having those Mitre map recurrent meetings. Have you seen like times, for example, you through attribution, you see like a specific threat actor poking on your perimeter, on your environment, but then they're not, one of the techniques they use is not phishing, but they are really good on leveraging stolen credentials. Have you gone all the way to change your stakeholders to go back to whoever, or maybe HR is responsible for user training, like regular phishing simulation and all that? I know companies vary. Sometimes it's HR doing that. Sometimes it's IT doing that. It changes a little bit. But have you gone down this path to actually chase, because of that gap, a new stakeholder?
Yeah, absolutely. We have, and we have opened risks against gaps that we identified as well. We saw an attack, we identified a gap in control, we opened the risk. So it was almost like putting the accountability and responsibility into those stakeholders' hands and making them understand that you can do nothing. But if you do nothing, you have to accept this risk.
Yeah.
So yeah, we have gone down that path multiple times in multiple forms and ways. And I guess the recent news around service desk, social engineering is a good example, for example. And we've done a couple of exercises internally around that and found improvements and went and made that improvement. So yeah, absolutely. And this is where my lessons learned. There have been times in my career where that wasn't the case, and I found something and proposed an action and nothing was taken. And this is where that experience and lessons learned come from, around making sure that what you do is actually actionable. And someone does something with it. And if not, then that is recorded somewhere as a risk, or the next month you do a Mitre map, if the previous month's gap haven't been patched, then you bring it up again, and you bring it up again, and you bring it up again, and that continues to be a constant story in your threat assessments, that this is what needs to change.
Awesome. And any network or resource groups that you participate that you would recommend to the listeners as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am, and I have always been a strong advocate for women in cyber, not least because obviously we all know there's not enough of us in the industry. But actually there's some really good learning opportunities and groups out there that can offer training, that can offer mentoring opportunities. So for example, I am the partnerships lead for the Women in Cyber Security UK and Ireland. And it's in the UK, that's a free membership. In the US, it's a small amount per year that you have to pay. However, the benefits you get are absolutely amazing in terms of training and free training opportunities, in terms of mentoring, in terms of actual just getting it out, getting out there and networking with people and seeing what other people are doing and learning from. Yeah, absolutely. I think generally, and I guess I'm coming from this from the perspective of being a woman, so this will apply to women listeners. Yeah, generally any women in cyber network, absolutely valuable, because you just get so much information and guidance, and even almost like if you can see it, you can be it, kind of a view. And that has guided me throughout my career as well. Being a woman in cyber is hard sometimes, and you do get ignored sometimes, but having those support groups and learning opportunities are amazing.
I love that. I had the chance to interact a few times with women in cybersecurity groups local here to my city, and it was always amazing. Like the support network they were able to build here is just, amazing, to say the least.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, they are called women in cyber groups, but most of the time, male allies are very much welcomed and encouraged. And I think from my experience, because I created one, and I had events for male allies as well and encouraged them to join. And the feedback was also amazing from the male allies as well. So it is a good networking opportunity and an additional resource to everything else you have as well, for everybody.
Yeah, it's a very least we could do, for sure. And I'll make sure I'll paste the link on the description of the episode. And from an industry standpoint, of course, we learn a lot on the daily, CTI reports and feeds and from the industry. But how do you learn about how the CTI role or CTI frameworks are reshaping or the news around that?
That's a really difficult question, actually, because funnily enough, I've never actually taken a CTI course per se or certification or anything like that. It was one of those, I want to do this, but I never got around to it because other courses were more interesting or because I was already kind of learning what I was doing. So I thought, well, I need to know that more than this. But I think there are plenty of resources out there. One of the useful ones that I actually used in terms of when I was building up the CTI function, in terms of actually defining what some of the skills for the team might be, and then aligning that to our intelligence requirements, is the NIST framework and NIST and ICSS. So they have a threat like task, skills, responsibilities section that lists different capabilities that a CTI function should have in terms of both tooling capability as well as people skills. And I found that quite useful. And even if you don't meet all of those requirements, it's a good indication as to where you would want to be, or what you accept as we don't need that because this isn't within our capability and that's not what we're trying to achieve with our CTI function. So it almost gives a bit of a checklist, like, yes, this is what we need. We don't need that because we're not aiming to do that. Other resources, I guess, it's just having an intelligence background in general really helps. And I found a lot of, or at least from my career, a lot of the CTI people I've met have often come from a public sector work. So doing some kind of intelligence in the police or some kind of intelligence in the military. So that is, having that intelligence background per se, and having that mindset of criticizing, I guess, in your head whenever you read something, the why, the what, the how, and constantly questioning whatever you read is something that you develop through that intelligence. And it is hard being a CTI person without that thinking. I have met people like that before. It is, you can learn those skills, but you would have to train yourself or force yourself a little bit more to question everything you read.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I think sometimes it feels that CTI folks might be the most susceptible ones, burn out, because the amount of information, if you really decide to tackle every single thing you're reading as like a real thing or not noise, it just comes from everywhere.
And it's then managing that stakeholder expectation as well, right? Because and in so many cases I've heard people in CTI say this, that, board asked about something that they read in the news that realistically will never really happen, or it isn't really what, the BBC reported on something and that wasn't the full story, or that wasn't going to happen, or whatever the backstory of that event actually was. And it's having, exactly as you said, having that historical knowledge almost of, I know this won't happen, or I know this will happen because I know the usual TTPs of this threat actor, of this usual behavior, or this tends to happen. It does take time, and it does take a lot of reading and a lot of critical thinking, and burnout at times, because there's just so much out there. And even when someone brings something up that you haven't yet had a chance to read because it was 5 minutes ago and you took a tea break and someone's questioning you about it, that causes in itself a lot of pressure and a lot of stress, especially if you're just starting off. So absolutely on the burnout and on the skills piece, it's just, you learn it as you do it, really.
Exactly. And it's funny you mentioned the board, because of course there is a lot of interaction with the CTI reports and risks and all that to the board. Talking to people the other day, it's like, if it's well written, it's going to almost sound like a James Bond related type of statement, because it got to be not technical, but just threats and all that. And I think that piece kind of also gets the board super excited, and then start like coming back to the CTI team. Oh, I saw this. What about that kind of things?
Exactly. Yeah. I love working with the board, to be honest. And you get interesting questions from them sometimes, but that relationship is so important because they are the people who make the decisions, and they will know stuff that you don't know as a lowdown person, as a CTI person. And it's so important to keep that conversation going and to keep honest and open communication. And yes, the way you phrase things has to be very careful, and technical jargon needs to go out the window. And if you're in a small team, like I happen to have been numerous times, and I was doing both tactical and strategic and operational, and you have to switch mindset between I need to provide this malware analysis to the detect and respond team or threat hunting team to look if there's something internal, to now I need to present something to the board. Having that mental switch between leaving the technical jargon behind and actually explaining risk and so what, and really focusing on what matters, it can be quite difficult, but it is really important in maintaining that, I guess, whole CTI picture.
Yeah, no, I love that. You have to understand your audience, right? So this shift is super important. And no, that's awesome. Any like closing thoughts for the audience? Any nice things about, or tips about, not tips? I should rephrase that maybe. But yeah, any like suggestions for the audience related to CTI?
Yeah, so I guess it depends who's listening. But if you're listening from a management board perspective, then I think use your CTI teams, speak to them, and really drive down and make those intelligence requirements clear. Because the value that you can get from a well-integrated and kind of communicated with CTI team can be absolutely invaluable in keeping it up to threats and up to recommendations and, just generally threat-informed decision-making. If you're listening from a CTI perspective, there's a couple of tips per se that I guess I would have. One of the biggest one that I found useful in my career is have a reporting threshold. I call it a reporting threshold. You can call it whatever you want. Mm-hmm. What it actually is have some kind of thresholds that when someone comes to you and says, hey, have you seen this? And why haven't you written a report on it? And why is there nothing done on it? You say, because it doesn't meet our criteria. Yes, I've seen it. It doesn't meet our criteria. Mm-hmm. That criteria is defined as per business need. Are you a financial sector? Then you might not care about retail attacks. Or you might. It depends what you care about. Defining that criteria takes understanding the business and what the business risk appetite is and where the business wants to go. But actually having that criteria saves so much of the burnt out that we talked about, mm-hmm. because you can easily say, yes, I have seen this 5 hours ago or last week or a minute ago. I haven't done anything on it because our criteria doesn't match our criteria. It doesn't cross our thresholds. There is nothing for us to worry about at the moment. And on top of this as well, have various points and links to the criteria as well. Have various points of escalation depending on what that threshold is. So hasn't met your threshold, okay, what are you doing with it now? Are you going to write a full-on 10-page report that's going to go to, board and stakeholders and mm-hmm. whoever? Are you going to do an email? Are you going to, raise a threat to detect and respond team or to threat hunting team, or just have that level of, right, this reached this level, so now we need to do X, Y, Z. Mm-hmm. Because having that clarity, again, it saves a lot of stakeholder management time and pressure and, stress, mm-hmm. but it also saves a lot of time as a CTI team in terms of prioritizing what needs to be looked at and how fast you can respond to things. Brings back into, again, KPIs and reporting and how do you actually measure the value and what you do. So a couple of points there, I guess. But yeah, having generally, I call it a reporting threshold, but having some kind of threshold that you will then take or don't take action on, I found extremely helpful throughout my career.
Oh, I love this reporting threshold idea. It's just prioritizing the most important things.
Exactly.
Unfortunately, no team will ever be able to cover everything. We wish, right? But it's just not the nature of the industry we are. And that's a really important idea, to make sure we're focused on the most important things.
And that's the other point as well. It touched on briefly there, but actually speak to your industry. There are plenty industry groups around there, and that's the best thing about CTI. It's one of those teams that are not isolated. CTI team is supposed to talk to people. You're supposed to go to conferences. You're supposed to be part of information sharing groups. Have those regular meetings, build those connections. And this isn't one of those, cliche, you have to be connected to get XYZ. This is almost one of the requirements of being a CTI team is to be out there, to talk to people, to share information, whether it's open sharing, closed forums, whatever it is. You need to be part of various groups that provide this information, because oftentimes you'll get faster information and first-hand information that you will not get in the news ever, or for a very long time. So having that will provide so much value in terms of being able to be reactive.
That's a great point. Yeah, being in touch with your peers, similar companies, you can get first-hand information of the things happening to them before it reaches the news.
And there are groups out there that you can say, hey, this is TLP red, don't share it, don't attribute it to us, but this is what's happening. And that information is just absolutely valuable. I know some companies are a bit protective over what they share and how much they share and what, where they go and talk to and speak to and what they actually put out there. And that's fair enough. There are legal restrictions, there are, intellectual property, there is sensitive data.
Yeah.
However, a CTI team with the right kind of measures and, structure in place can get so much value from this.
Absolutely. Bianca, thank you so much for so many insights. Loved our conversation. I really appreciate sharing all that. And I hope I'll see you around. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me. Best of luck.
You as well. Bye.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in. If you found this episode valuable, don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave a review. Got thoughts or questions? Connect with us on our LinkedIn group, Cyber Threat Intelligence Podcast. We'd love to hear from you. If you know anyone with CTI expertise that would like to be interviewed in the show, just let us know. Until next time, stay sharp and stay secure.